Today on the Bass Channel, we're checking out the Nanobass X4 from Phil Jones Bass. Is a single-channel combo amplifier for multiple instruments such as bass, guitar, ukulele, violin, electronic drums, so on and so forth, that has a 1/4-inch jack input socket for instruments and a 3.5mm stereo jack auxiliary input for your MP3 player or drum machine, and a 3.5mm stereo jack for your headphones. It features a 3-band EQ that is perfectly tailored for your instrument but can also play music with the Bluetooth function. The proprietary PJB NeoPower 4-inch speakers have a full frequency range to the highest audio frequencies. Not only does this give greater clarity and transparency to your instrument, but also a high-fidelity sound to any backing track fed into the auxiliary input. Okay, so that was just a small bit from the manual, but really this is just a killer little practice rig with a 3-band EQ, Bluetooth functionality, headphone input, and a little teeny tiny speaker that kind of sounds surprisingly awesome. So for all of the bass sounds in this video, the sounds of somebody playing a bass like we normally do, they're all coming out of the speaker and they're mic'd with the same mic that you're hearing my voice actually. It's a Sennheiser MKH416, which, again, of the microphones that I own, it's kind of the most neutral, the flattest frequency. It's placed about 4 inches or so from the center of the speaker, and this is what it sounds like. Despite it sounding surprisingly large for such a small little package that's quite lightweight as well, it's got all the great tone that you've come to expect from Phil Jones Bass. It's really high fidelity, it's really clear, and it just sounds good. But we were actually able to put the Bluetooth through its paces, which I don't often get a chance to do in the studio because I can just kind of sync everything in post and it feels easier to do that for me. But we were recently out at the NAMM show a couple weeks ago, and while we were there, as you've probably seen, we shot the video of Josh playing Inner Sandman with as many different basses as we can get. Josh had to brush up on that song the night before, so we actually used this amp, we brought it with us, and we used it in the hotel room to Bluetooth Inner Sandman, and Josh plugged the bass right into it, and he was able to practice the song a couple times, and he was able to nail it the next day. So it felt really good to actually actually put a piece of gear through its full paces instead of just showing you only what it sounds like and then telling you what else it can do and have fun doing it. So on that note, I got a note from my friend Rick over at Phil Jones Bass asking if I had an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar to show that this amp is also great to play electric guitar or acoustic guitar through. As we heard in the manual, it's good for keys, it's good for electronic drums. So I thought, okay, I can maybe do one better. When I was about 23 years old, I arranged and recorded this particular song, and it was a little bit more of an ambitious effort. It seems like everyone's mostly ambitious when they're in their early to mid-20s. But luckily, because I didn't really know that much about recording then, I would just accidentally record everything direct and then do all the guitar sounds and everything else in the software. So now I'm left with a bunch of just raw, direct guitar tracks and MIDI drums and all this stuff that I can just reamp. So I thought, well, let's take all of the instruments that I used in that song and reamp them through this. And since we've already heard the speaker, I thought this would be a good chance to show off the headphone output, because again, if you're gonna play keys or electronic drums or bass or guitar, at least 50% of the time you're probably going to use phones, right? Because if you want to jam at 2 a.m. and your significant other or your parents or your roommate or whoever you may live with is asleep, you got to be quiet. So all of the sounds from these next few examples are coming out of the headphone output, but I still utilize the 3-band EQ and the input gain and all that sort of thing to kind of make each instrument sound the best it could be. So let's start with the drums. And then, of course, moving on to the bass, for this one, I ran first through the Seymour Duncan Studio Bass compressor, and then into this headphone out, and here's what it sounds like. And we've got a piano setting with some string accompaniment in the background. And then for the electric guitars, I ran them into my Way Huge Camel Toe with settings that you'll see in just a moment, and then into this amp with the treble attenuated a bit because, again, we're going through the headphones, and guitar speakers are pretty good at attenuating the extreme highs, so I just did that with the EQ. And then, of course, we've got a whole string section. And finally, some xylophone thing that I don't know. Again, this was like 10 years ago I did this song, so I don't really remember arranging a lot of it. But I'm happy with the song. I kind of rediscovered it over the last couple weeks here, kind of prepping for this video and putting it all in there. And so to sign off, I'm just going to leave you with the full song. Every instrument except for the vocals is going through the Nanobass X4 out of the headphone amp, and then I've just kind of tweaked the levels so it suits and sounds close to a real song, I guess. So the song's called Haunted. My friend actually wrote the words and the main melody, and then I arranged all of the stuff, the drums, the keys, the strings, the xylophone, all that sort of thing, and I recorded it. So I hope you enjoy. We got end cards coming up later, and I'll see you next time.
Time just a little bit. My mind is just a little bit overwhelmed with all of it. Just let me settle in. Whoa, this light is always on. Curtains drawn.